Okay, guys. So, welcome back to class. This is English 250, Week 7, Part 1. Um, Welcome back. And you guys have, if you've watched all the lectures up until this point, you've successfully completed the art and reality unit. So now we're going to begin the art and authors unit, um, which is a very good unit, by the way. And I'm back, in the woods. I'm not really in the woods. I'm in New York City, but it feels like I'm in the woods. Talking about a guy who loves the fucking woods, William Wordsworth from the 19th century. Um, Wordsworth, I like teaching Wordsworth. Students like Wordsworth, and I like teaching Wordsworth. There's something slightly tricky about teaching Wordsworth, though. Some of the guys that I've shown you, um, I'm sorry, I guess I should say more about the sort of general structure of the class again, but just to kind of remind you. So we had the art and reality unit where we had 6 authors. We had Plato and Sidney and Pope and Oscar Wilde and Baudrillard and Derrida, who were all discussing what is the relationship between art and reality, and they had different theories and different kinds of things. And I want there's a conversation happening sort of between them, right? That they're reading each other, and the later guys are reading the earlier guys, and thinking about kind of the larger, what's going on this sort of philosophical topic. And so I could have kept going with that forever. There's 100 other philosophers I could have given you, and each philosopher I gave you 2 pages of, but of course they each wrote many books, long things that you could read. So now we head into art and authors, and this is a different kind of literary question, which is what is the relationship between a work of art and its author? Seems real obvious. The author is the person who wrote the work of art. But as you probably can guess from the art and reality unit, what seems easy is when you get a philosopher thinking about it, it starts becoming super fucking complicated, right? So I'm sure when you came in the classroom, you probably thought to yourself, what's the relationship between art and reality? Well, art copies reality, or art is an escape from reality. And you can see that opened up all kinds of complicated discussions. This is also going to open up all kinds of complicated discussions. So art and authors. Okay, cool. So Wordsworth is the first guy we're going to look at. He's a real important guy, Wordsworth. Wordsworth is tough to teach, though. Some of the people that I showed you in the last unit were surprising. They said bizarre, strange things that I hope kind of blew your mind a little bit. You read Derrida and you're like, I know how words work. A word represents reality. Easy. And Derrida's like, does it though? And then you're like, oh shit, I don't think I know all of the things I thought I knew. And it's kind of and Baudrillard, this whole complicated idea that, what if art is a copy of reality, but then reality starts to disintegrate, so all you have left is the copy. What if there's no more oranges, but there's only orange Gatorade? How is that? That's a fucked up thought. So how do you get from an actual pumpkin to a pumpkin pie to a pumpkin spice latte? Right, the pumpkin spice latte has a kind of funny there's a trajectory there where it's like the pumpkin is reality, and pumpkin pie is like you've done something to reality or changed it or altered. Like, the pumpkin's made by God, and the pumpkin pie is made by you. But the pumpkin spice latte feels like it's they call it pumpkin spice, but like it's clearly divorced from reality in some dramatic way. So these ideas are kind of like blow your mind ideas. They're strange. Wordsworth should be like that. Wordsworth, who is a poet. Wordsworth's primarily known as a poet. A lot of people that teach this class give students they only give students philosophers, because it's like theory, literary studies, and they give you philosophers talking about works of art. But the people making the works of art, the poets, are also a kind of philosopher. Every poet is a type of philosopher. Every movie maker is a philosopher. Every person who writes I've said this before, but every work of art, every artist is also a thinker. My students, especially, and my writing and lit students, like you guys, every semester I get a couple of students, and if you're one of these people, good luck. But every semester I get students who love to write but hate to read. I can't think of a single good author who is not also a good reader. But you could be the first. Could be you. These guys are thinkers. Wordsworth is a poet. He's primarily known as a poet. The nice thing about Wordsworth, actually, is if you don't know Wordsworth at all, and you want to get to know Wordsworth real well, you only need to read 3 poems. He basically only wrote, maybe 4, The fourth one's long. But if you read 3 poems by Wordsworth, you will have all of Wordsworth wrote a whole bunch of shit, but everything he does good is contained in 3 poems. If you want to get to know Shakespeare real well, you're going to need to read 25 plays, and that's going to take a long fucking time. But if you want to know Wordsworth, you just got to read 3 poems, and they're a little long, but they're not really that long. You can handle them. If you'd like to get to know Wordsworth better, the poems that he writes that you need to know as a poet are Tintern Abbey, Resolution and Independence, and the fuck is the other one? Oh, Ode to Intimations of Immortality. I can't remember the fucking name of that poem. Intimations of Immortality, the ode. If you read those 3 poems, you will have Wordsworth in your pocket. By the way, Wordsworth's one of the most famous poets of all time. He's one of the most important poets of all time, and I'll be talking about why. By the way, Wordsworth had a buddy named Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Coleridge is a badass. Like Wordsworth, though, he wrote a whole bunch of poems, but a lot of them are garbage. You only need 3 Coleridge poems. Kubla Khan. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure-domed decree, where Alph the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. So you need Kubla Khan, Christabel, and Rime of the Ancient Mariner. You get those 3 poems, you have it. Because sometimes with an author, you got to read like 1,000. Like if you like David Foster Wallace, you got to read like a 1,500-page book to even know who he is. But with Wordsworth and Coleridge, 3 poems each and you're done. Wordsworth wrote another important poem called The Prelude, but I don't want to deal with that. It's longer. It's for diehards. Okay, so Wordsworth is a massively important poet. The problem teaching Wordsworth is that he's shocking. Wordsworth changed the world with what he did. But when I show him to students, they're not impressed. Why are they not impressed? Because they think everything Wordsworth is saying is so obvious. Like, oh my God, professor, like, this is not interesting. Everybody knows this already. This is so obvious that what he's saying is true. It's just how life is. He's just describing how life is. This is so boring. Everybody knows this already. Here's the fucked up thing. The reason why students find Wordsworth boring, the reason why they find him obvious, is because we all live in the world that Wordsworth created. He invented ideas that became so widespread, we don't even remember that anyone invented them. We're just like, I don't know, that's just true. It's not true. Wordsworth came up with them. And the reason why students are bored with Wordsworth is because they're like, well, this is all obvious. The only reason it's obvious is because Wordsworth invented it, and then everybody started believing Wordsworth. And now you think what Wordsworth said is just the truth. But it wasn't. Before Wordsworth, people did not. When Wordsworth published this thing, it blew people's fucking minds. And then everybody agreed with Wordsworth, and you live in the world Wordsworth created. You can take poetic history, the history of poetry, particularly poetry, and basically divide it into 2 sections. Obviously you can divide it into smaller sections, right? You get ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and you've got, medieval poetry, and you've got, the Renaissance poetry, and, the 1700s, which I don't give a shit about, and then you got, the Romanticism and Victorians, and you can divide them into countries and areas and stuff. But really, you could divide all of poetry into 2 giant chunks: before Wordsworth and after Wordsworth. That's how important this motherfucker is. Wordsworth published a book of poems. And they were so shocking, and again, you won't find them shocking or interesting, but they were so shocking and interesting at the time. Why don't you find them shocking and interesting? Because everybody and their grandma started copying Wordsworth, and it just became what poetry's like, but it didn't used to be like that. He fucking invented it. So Wordsworth wrote a book of poetry called Lyrical Ballads. And these poems were so fucking bonkers that he put an essay in front of the poems to explain what he was doing and why. And so the piece that you're going to be reading today it's longer than I printed out for you, but it's or I gave you, but it's his essay that he put at the beginning of a book of poetry to try to explain to people why the fuck he wrote such bonkers poems. And again, the poems will not seem bonkers to you. Nothing he says in the essay will seem bonkers to you. It's so basic because after he invented it, everybody believed it, and it became normal. But it wasn't normal before he lived. So let's find out what the fuck he had to say. I'll see you in the next video.